Hey everybody, what's going on? What's going on, Max people? I cannot believe that we are already on day 2 and that I get to hang out with the ever amazing Hungry Boy. My name's Aundre Larrow, and as I mentioned before, I'm here with Aaron Bernstein, otherwise known as Hungry Boy. That's what they call him in the streets, because not only is he always hungry, but he takes great, amazing images, videos, and motion of food, as you can see with our background. Or no, not yet, but you will see soon.
How's it going?
How is it going?
It's going. It's weird to be in the same city, but so far apart. And the fact
It is.
Continue in so long, but here we are. It's better than nothing.
Yeah. Thank you for saying that. For anyone that's watching, we really appreciate that you are choosing to spend your time with us. We know that coronavirus is a tricky time. COVID-19 is a very deadly and scary thing, and it's nice that, thanks to the internet, we can have some way to bond. So please, we hope that the chat remains really, really active. I actually am going to open it up on my phone if anyone asks any questions. But today we're going to be talking to you about how, the new features in Lightroom Mobile, how Lightroom works, give you some little tips here and there, and then more importantly, we're going to have Aaron talk to us about how he does such a great job with color and food. So, without any further ado, Hungry Boy, how are we feeling?
We're good.
Are we feeling hungry? What'd you eat today?
Always hungry. Had some yogurt. I had a lot of coffee. Seemed like the usual weekday sort of routine. Then sitting in front of the computer for too long, forgetting to eat. So yeah, after this, you bet it's gonna be like a really good, hopefully victory dinner, and then on to tomorrow.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, shout out to victory dinner.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see how it goes first.
Okay.
In the meantime, we have a lot of food photographs to comb through and to look at, and so we can feast through those, I guess.
Yes. And if anyone feels hungry, there are delivery services, because despite the name Hungry Boy, Aaron will not be giving you any food. Today, we will only be feeding your hunger to be a better creative.
Exactly.
So, Aaron, why don't we take a second for the folks that are in here early to let them know how to find you on the internet. I know that we said Hungry Boy, but I know that there are different iterations of this. A hungry.boy, hungry_boy. Where are we at?
Yeah, so my main website, that's where everything lives. And then on social, you can find me on Instagram at hungry.boy. So
great
variations.
Why don't we actually start with your Instagram? I know that right now I have your site up, so there's a lot of movement and folks must be kind of bubbling around. But I think since we're going to be talking about Lightroom first, the thing that's important for us to remember is the thing that is great about Lightroom is, since it's a cloud-based ecosystem between your iPad, your phone, your computer, and Lightroom Web, you have an opportunity to work seamlessly. And a lot of times that means getting right to being able to share on Instagram. So I'm going to scroll for a little bit. Is there anything that you want me to stop on that was particularly difficult or interesting, or just a story that's worth sharing?
I mean, dealer's choice, maybe the potato chip shirt right there.
Oh, wow. This?
Yeah, so this is like a pretty good example of, something that I do. So I am primarily a photographer here in New York. I do a lot of product photography, still life, and a lot of that is food, especially this year. A lot of it is CPG, which is consumer product goods. A lot of places are sort of pivoting, having to find new ways to market their product online. Yeah. And I think with that comes with a new challenge of how can you sort of create a multi-sensory experience of a food product when you don't actually have it tangibly in front of you. So my photography over time has sort of evolved into doing these sort of stop motion animations. And then on top of that, figuring out how to make it unique to me. So something that I think is sort of special, and what I try to do with everything is I like to have really controlled lighting that you would see in like in still photographs, and then adapt that to animation instead of sort of like a more generic flat overview of what you might see for a stop motion that's very clean with very minimal shadows. I like to challenge myself and keep all of that in. And so, yeah, it's been a process. And then of course with Instagram, I show a lot of my work on there, but then I am also showing a lot of behind the scenes, and I also like to shoot on the go on my phone. So Lightroom has been a really great way to sort of work on that side of things. Whereas for client work and for my professional work or things that I actually get paid for, I'm actually using Lightroom Classic a lot. I'm tethering on there, I'm batch editing on there, but then at the same time, I can sort of move everything over to Lightroom, the newest Lightroom, the modern Lightroom, and sort of work cross-platform on my phone and on my desktop.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's rad. So, Aaron, I know that you were an Adobe Creative Resident in 2018. Before that happened, what kind of work were you doing, and how did you transition into food, or what kind of inspired that? You can give us maybe your medium pitch, not your like 3 hour pitch, but we can do like a 4 to 5 minute. I
I
know
was
that people are
saying,
interesting. They're hungry for more.
I haven't done this in a minute, but it's good practice. So before this, I was actually working in fashion, and I always thought that I wanted to be a fashion photographer. I was freelancing as a fashion photographer for a while, shooting a lot of magazine imagery and editorial, and then also creating content for a modeling agency full time. It's something that sort of got my foot in the door in New York, and something that I sort of saw starting to pigeonhole as it got like more niche and more specific over the years. New York was never a place that I necessarily wanted to be at all. It was very overwhelming in my experience as an intern, especially just sort of like running around the city before smartphones really existed and printing out directions on MapQuest and trying to figure everything out. And so I didn't have a bad experience with New York. I just wasn't really feeling it. But I knew that for my career, like this is where I needed to be to do it at the level that I wanted to. And so I sort of just like kept my head down for 4 or 5 years, doing what I could. Just, as you know, every day here is just like a victory if you wake up and you're still here the next day.
Yeah.
But food sort of became this thing that was a sense of comfort, and then also by default familiarity. It became like a really easy gateway to exploring my neighborhood and understanding different communities in the city. And I think slowly over time, as my photo work grew, I realized like at the same time, it was harder and harder to create at the production level that I wanted to, just starting out. But food was something that I could sort of just bring into my apartment, create makeshift studio setups, and sort of create with no pressure or no expectations. And it started showing up in a lot of my fashion work as props and in the background. And then over time, I just sort of lost the people, took a leap of faith, did the Adobe Creative Residency, focused solely on food. So I had a year to really build up that portfolio. And here we are, a year and a half later, on the other side. Sure. So yeah.
Great. I love that. I forgot. So anyone that's in here, my name's Aundre the Row. I am here to essentially just lift Aaron and show him to you like Rafiki does Simba in The Lion King. Not that he needs my help at all, but my goal is to talk to you about Lightroom, but we're primarily talking about food photography. So shout out to anyone that came to listen to me talk, but we're here to listen to Aaron. We're going to get into Lightroom soon, but I think that it's important for us to make sure that we are continuing to talk about process. So Aaron was just discussing how he started doing a lot of fashion photography. So Aaron, for the people out there that are like me and shoot a lot of people, what is something that we would advise them if they're starting to get into food or even object still life photography? What are some like first things that we want to think about, how we think about color, framing, lighting? I don't know. Take the ball and run with it.
Sure. I mean, the nice thing about food is generally it's a lot smaller than a subject, like a person, when you're shooting. So I think there are pros and cons to that. on one hand, like for lighting, especially if you're using artificial lighting or if you're working in a studio, you can light things a lot more evenly and in much more confined spaces than you can with a person. Of course, if you're working in an environment, like there's a lot less of an environment that you need to work with or worry about if you're shooting something like food. One thing that sort of naturally led my transition over into the food world was just the same interest that I had in fashion in exploring color narratives and textures and just the relationships that you can create between different elements in fashion, between like the clothing and accessories and the people, if I was shooting people. Um, and so with food, I found the same sort of patterns that I can create and interests. The difference being like there's a lot less of a, I guess, window for the unexpected with food. I think unless you're physically creating that yourself, people, they move. And especially if you're working with models, in my experience, you don't know necessarily how they're going to move, or you can direct them a certain way, but there are so many variables between like such usually like big collaborative teams with makeup artists and hairstylists and wardrobe stylists and assistants and grips and whatnot. But with food, you pretty much know what's in front of you. And so you can really sort of make sure that on the technical side, you're really like digging deep to make it the best that you can.
Totally. Well, this is a good time transition as ever. We're going to kind of switch over to my phone because just as Chris pointed out, this is supposed to be photography on the go with Lightroom Mobile. So folks, yes, it is photography on the go, but as I've done this session in the past, my goal has been to talk about portrait photography. But since we get to talk about food, I just wanted to make sure that for folks who haven't done it before, they can really understand, what Aaron's ethos is and how you start to think about what you want to create. So with that in mind, we're going to switch over to my phone and we're going to just open up Lightroom. I don't know why. Yep, absolutely. Ugh. It's fine. We'll just do it from the iPad. So, as we're nice and plugged in, we're actually going to start with the iPad because, like I said, the integration between Lightroom works across all your platforms. And so I kind of wanted to take a minute to explain to you all what Lightroom looks like upon open and close. So we're going to just launch it like normal. Obviously, it's a Creative Cloud platform. And I just want to call attention to a couple things. So up in the top, excuse me, I forgot one thing. Okay, up in this top right bar is your organizational structure. So as you import images, you can put them into folders. So folders, think of like a regular folder. Folders hold albums and albums hold photos. So over here we have albums, we have folders. And as you work through your Lightroom, the very first thing you want to do is import an image. You'll see if I tap this bottom right corner, it'll say, if I want to import it from all photos, camera rolls, etc. And one nice thing with the Lightroom ecosystem is you can import, even if you're using a phone or a tablet, you can import directly from your SD card. So you see at the bottom, it says from camera device, right underneath from files. That's just something to call out. But the main reason why I wanted to start here was because I wanted to take a moment to explain to you all what some of the biggest changes in Lightroom have been. So if you use Lightroom every day, you've probably noticed this already, but I wanted to walk you through what this daily inspiration is. So Lightroom understands that all of us come from different, or the Lightroom team understands that all of us come from different backgrounds as creators. And so some of us, our parents have been photographers, our grandparents are photographers, or there's someone who's mentored us. Some of us we've learned from school, some of us we've learned on our own. And so there's huge gaps in, how folks do things. And often when we learn how to do stuff, we just replicate it and work off of that. And so in an effort to try to make learning a little bit more equitable, the Lightroom team has spent a lot of time in this area of creating both discover files and tutorials. So I'm actually going to go to mine because I don't want to speak on other people's work. But here you'll see I have 3 tutorials. The tutorial's a little bit longer. But then if you go over to edits, discover files or edits. And so we'll go to a quick one that people seem to like. Where'd you go? Here, this photo of Victoria. So you'll see at the bottom, it prompts you to say, tap on edits to navigate and examine edits step by step. The way that this application works is it shows you what the original image is and the final. And if you were to slide from the bottom, it'll show you every step along the way. So it shows you it's an HEIC file, which is an iPhone file. See that first, I changed my highlights. I brought them up a little bit, then my shadows. And you're seeing with each step, even if it's subtle, what the changes are. So as you scroll, all of a sudden you're seeing, oh, these are what these things do. And that's important because, for example, I know a lot of folks are curious about what's the difference between vibrance and saturation. Saturation is almost like it's kind of a dumb tool. It saturates every pixel evenly. All the colors get more rich. Vibrance is a little bit smarter. Vibrance reaches out and looks for the colors that are a little bit more muted and just boosts those. And so you wouldn't know that if you didn't start to play with it or you saw how other people used it. Ooh. And you see that I use color mix and we go through and we get to the end, it actually gives you this sweet option called save as preset, where if you like an edit that someone did, you can save it as a preset and then try it on your own images and slide it in between. The second thing I want to point out, actually, let me just go ahead and do one more, just so it's not super fast and everyone understands. You see, just by sitting here, as it rolls through, it shows exactly how I edited it. So you can go from the beginning to the end of the edit. And as you go through, swipe up for your edits. Once again, you'll see this is a CR2 file. I shot it on my Mark IV, which I'm actually using to stream. I brought my exposure up. You see how it just gives a little bit more lightness to the image, kind of like saturation. Exposure is a little bit of like a dumb tool in that it just makes all of the light values higher. You see that I brought contrast down, highlights down, so that it was a little bit flatter. And then we continued to work to kind of get to the edit I want. You'll see that big changes happen in curves and etc. And so it's kind of like a nice thing in that after it's over, if you like it, you can save it. If you don't like it, you can still reference it at a point to learn things. Now, those have a little bit of guesswork, but they're quick. You can look at them on your phone, if you're on the train, if you're on a plane, you're waiting for something. But let's say you really want to get down and gritty. You can actually go over and go through a full tutorial. So the way this works is the Lightroom team works with some of us, and we get to write these tutorials and kind of speak in the first person about how we, or what inspired us to edit in this way. And so it walks you through every step. So it explains to you which profile I use. You can see at the very bottom of the screen that there are 41 steps, which I know seems like a lot, but the hope here is you're seeing every piecemeal thing, and it's not that anything that I'm doing is necessarily right, but it's just a different way to think about it. And so instead of looking at a book, as you work through here, I'm just gonna tap through some of these steps. You'll see it shows you where to touch. It shows you where I went. I'm writing exactly what motivated me. And you can go ahead and find a lot of really cool work from a lot of photographers that you like. So as we go through, it'll say like tap and hold for you to see the before and after. And so this is all built to be as interactive as Lightroom is. And the goal here is that you understand how the tools work so that they are second nature to you, kind of like the cameras that you decide to use. The goal with a good camera is for you to pick it up and not have to fiddle with it. You just know where you need to go. That's the goal when we are showing you Lightroom. Do we have any questions? Let me make sure I'm not ignoring if anyone's asking anything important. But yeah, no, this is super awesome. Anyone have any questions before I hop over to anything? Yes, and Rich, I am using an iPad Pro. But anyway, I don't have to show you this whole thing. It's kind of long, but you'll just see I'll say things like I add bright tones to add a hint of sparks. So I bring up whites. Something else to point out. We have these like little, when the chapters change, it'll have like I love refining the contrast and color of my curve, like whatever. I helped clean it up, but I did the best I could. Something to point out in how I edit, and we're going to ask Aaron about this in a minute, is for me, I said exposure is a dumb tool. I like highlights and shadows a little bit better because what essentially happens is your highlights slider will bring up or down just your brightest values, and your shadow slider will bring up or down your darkest values. And if you're confused about what that is, oh, it's not going to let me do this while I'm in the tutorial. Let's go ahead and hop out of here, give myself a PAPI rating, and it gives you some more to look at. Once again, you'll see that there's other people's work through here, totally worth checking out. And no matter whether you have a free account or a paid account, you can get these over here. And these are your tutorials, this little light bulb, and then on the right are your Discover files. So I want to kick it to Aaron. Aaron, is there anything that you really love about Lightroom Mobile that you'd like me to show or talk about? Oh, excuse me. Aaron said, how do you get to the step-by-step? Or Ron said that. Ron, if you head over to this top right corner, you hit this little light bulb. When you click on these, it'll give you the step-by-step. They're called tutorials, and it'll say your recommended tutorials based on what you've explored and liked, and you can tap those. Also, if there's a photographer you know, you could ask them if they have an Adobe account and see if they have any ones. Like for me, mine are right here. I'm not sure if the team can populate it, but I can put the link in later when I'm not actively trying to show y'all stuff. Aaron, is there anything that you'd like me to point out? I know I've just been like monologuing for a minute. I want to make sure everyone feels like they're being heard.
I would definitely echo what you were saying about vibrance. It's definitely my favorite tool across all Creative Cloud. I think it's a very undervalued tool, and I think especially for someone like myself that works with a lot of color, it's a really great way just to sort of amplify that without going too overboard and sort of maintaining control. I guess going off of that, something that I found really cool in Lightroom are the versions that you can do now, where you can and we can walk you through that as well a little bit later, but you can edit different versions of a photo and keep it all within the same photo without actually saving multiple versions or multiple files to sort of compare and contrast, to like see which edit you like better, or over time, like you can export the different versions if you want to include many different kinds.
What a weird time for that to just crash. I love that this is how it all works.
Everything
works fine, and then all of a sudden. So just to give you a little bit more clarity as what we're talking about with vibrance, I'm just going to pulling up a couple images. This is something I photographed for my darker skin tone series a couple years ago. It's a photo of my friend Janelle. So one thing I want to do is make sure that we're walking through what happens in Lightroom after you have an image and you've imported it. So first and foremost, if you press and hold, you'll see that it will show you the before and the after. And just to look at the very top of the bar up here, you'll see in this menu bar, it says before and after. And the goal in doing that is for you to see how far your edit has come. If you go ahead and look on your right-hand side, you have a couple options. You have edit, profile, light, color, effects, detail, optics, and geometry, and you have some logos. All those logos let you know what like little panel or tool you're in. So we have edit, presets, cropping, and rotating, healing brush, selective edits, and then versions. We'll talk about the versions a little bit later, but just to give you a quick touch through, let's go all the way back and make this image the original. When we go into our edit panel and go to light, edit's where you're gonna spend most of your time. Light impacts your light primarily, right? For younger photographers or for any photographer, the thing that I always advise is for you to look at the image and ask yourself, where is the light coming from? Being able to answer that question will help you understand what parts of the image you like and how to replicate something that you think is cool, right? So if you understand where the light's coming from, then you can create something with outside, with strobes, anything like that. Once you know where the light's coming from, then you want to ask yourself, what do I want to do with this image? How do I want to make my subjects feel? I would tell you to avoid having wide, like little swatches in exposure. Those can be really aggressive. Something else to keep in mind is that when you look at an image, your eye's always going to fall on the brightest part of it. So just making sure you have a nice, even image is really important. A couple things to call out about Lightroom ecosystem, mobile, iPad, is if you make an edit and you don't like it, if you simply double tap on the slider, it'll go right back to center. Another thing to point out is that I like to think about editing wise, and I'll then toss this over to Aaron, is often I think we get really excited about changing our contrast, but I'm not sure that we always understand what that does. There are times when we increase contrast where it might actually impact our color in an unnatural way. And so sometimes I would advise, instead of immediately jumping to contrast, if you go over to effects, you can get a little bit of contrast in something like clarity or texture that isn't as harsh. I still think that however you choose to edit is really, really important, being looking kind of strange. Does that make sense? Aaron, you got anything?
I mean, there's such a fine line too, I was going to say, with people and editing people, and especially when you're getting into like the texture and the clarity. I found that, especially working with food, I have much more leeway now, and I think a lot of the times like pushing that helps more than it hurts. And I think on the flip side, when you're shooting live subjects, it's usually the opposite. So when I started to feel for how you like to edit and see in the food that I'm shooting.
Absolutely. Heck yeah. What earlier was in your Discover files, which you tap to over here in the Lightroom ecosystem. Discover files are essentially images that if you were to hover over them and hold, it shows you the before and after. So if you look at the center image, where this red dot is, you see this little TLC cover. So if I go back to my library, which we have up, let's say we take this photo of Janelle that we love and we're like, we're gonna make this blue, like forget the orange. The very next noir that are black and white from my friend Sam Harin. I also have some, and I'm also happy to put those in the comments soon. But if you go down to this thing called Saved Presets, you'll see that Sancho's preset is right there. Now this, I wouldn't advise anyone to use this, but it saves it ready for you. And if you see here, it has blue and gray tones by me. It has the names and by the person who made them. And so let's just say cancel because that's terrifying to look at. But you can pull up presets very, very simply. And one nice thing about Lightroom, once again, through the whole ecosystem, is the edits are non-destructive. So that means that any edit you make, so we'll do a bunch of stuff. Any edit you make, we'll just do something crazy. You can then just say, I don't like this. You can hold this back button and go all the way back to open, and it's like nothing happened. But if you choose to like it, you can use versions, which we talked about later, or we're going to talk about later, to help you edit and try different looks for things. And you can save things as presets and work backward from that preset in the future. Aaron, why don't we switch over to your phone and we can talk a little bit about how you use your phone when you take photos of food, or just how you look at the Lightroom camera from now. Yes. Anything you want to call out, thoughts like that? Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you haven't seen from my work, like I don't approach food in a very typical way. I'm not shooting recipes a lot of the time. I'm not really even shooting like fully formed dishes really for any clients at this point. It all gets very abstract. And so on mobile, I sort of like to take a lot of behind the scenes and push that and share as I go what I can when I can. You know, with client work, you're not allowed to share a lot of the time. So I like to have like my own mini shoot to the side of that to share something with all of you lovely people. So you can take a look at my camera roll here. Some of these are from when we could be out and about in the world, but a lot of times it's on set or something that I came across that just appealed to me. And what you can kind of see from these images is I approach a lot of my personal work the same way that I approach my professional work. I shoot top down a lot of the time, which can make things very tricky, but also sometimes very, very easy and more flexible with editing. It's just something for me, like a lot of information overwhelms me. So if I can strip it down and control it to its base elements, I can then process it in my mind on how I want it to look and what the outcome can be like. So that's also why, in general, a lot of my work are flat lays or, you know, single source lights, like a strong sunlight, for example, especially in these behind the scenes, to really convey like the shapes and the textures and the color relationships that I want to show. I also like to use Lightroom to review photos that I'm using for stop motions. So these big groups of photos, you can kind of see there's slight variety with different water dropping, but then also a mix of raw files that I've yet to edit that maybe I just want to clean up, that are like a client reject or something that I want to share or further edit. If I'm sitting on the train or something, I spent, I should say, a lot of the time on the train commuting and having a lot of time to kill. So it's just a really great way to keep myself organized on the way to the studio, from the studio, to get ahead of client edits, or even just to to sort of do basic cleanups to share with a client, you know, that's a little bit better than a raw image straight from out of the camera.
Totally.
Yeah.
Interesting. I would be remiss to do this. I'm so sorry. Can we switch back to my phone really fast? Hold on, I completely didn't remember, or unless you want to do it, Aaron, I completely forgot to just give a little intro as to how the Lightroom camera looks. I just want to make sure everyone is...
I'm more than happy to do that. I don't have anything that I can like show to shoot, but you can actually take photos directly in Lightroom, which is really great. And there are a lot of, I guess, options and settings that you can use within the actual app that...
Yeah, let me, I'll do a quick takeover and just do a horrible selfie so everyone can see how this works.
Beautiful.
I am so sorry. I completely forgot to do this. So while we're waiting to pull it up, everyone, Lightroom is free. Oh yeah, no, this is my bad. I should have transitioned it better. Lightroom is free, and so you have the awesome pleasure of getting to take a photo with a pro level features, pro level control from your phone. For everyone that's curious, I'm currently using the iPhone 12 Pro, and the 11 Pro is right here, but just for demo purposes of using the 12 Pro. Something I want to call out first. So we open Lightroom, we open the camera. To open the camera, we go down to this bottom right corner and hit camera. And immediately something like auto opens up. So auto, just like your iPhone camera, or excuse me, with your mobile camera, will show up and say, hey, do you want to take a photo? Let me make it easy for you. You can flip the camera. Look at it yourself. Or you can put some presets on here, just so you know. You could tap around, make a high contrast black and white, like I'm shooting a noir film or something. And one thing that's nice is all the way at the end, these little lines let you know that's the original. You can tap presets, it goes away. You can turn flash on and off, but we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about the Lightroom professional camera. So to access that, you want to go tap in your bottom, not on your bottom, but in the bottom of this, and you want to hit professional. And all of a sudden all these features pop up and you're like, whoa, chill, Dre, I'm already looking at your face. But the thing that's really cool about this I want to call out is I'm a big fan of the native camera app for the iPhone. I use it all the time. But the thing that I really like about the Lightroom app is a couple things. First and foremost, because I know we don't have all the time in the world, or I wonder if it's not going to let me because I'm plugged in. I can change my exposure compensation without having to alter anything. And that's something I really, really like. And so, for example, your camera is always going to try to get to 18% gray. And I know this is confusing for y'all because you're looking at a photo of me and a photo of me, but the only thing I can show without giving you super inception is this. So sorry, deal with it. Sometimes your camera will say, this shirt, I'm wearing this shirt for a reason, is black. And so it's underexposed. It's too dark. And so your camera is automatically going to try to brighten it up. When in actuality, you want it to be that black or you want it to be that white. Your camera is always trying to get to 18% gray. And so being able to use exposure compensation is really helpful. And you can do it without having to lock down your exposure like you would in your native camera app for your phone. Second, you can alter your shutter speed. This is really helpful if you want to get some motion blur, or for whatever reason, you're trying to catch a little action. I love shooting on mobile, but I probably wouldn't advise shooting sports with that. You can change your ISO also to try to, ISO for the curious folks is how sensitive your camera is to light. The more sensitive it is, the slightly lower quality the image is, but that's how you take concert photography, photos at night, like your night mode for your phone, etc. And then white balance is pretty simple. It's the temperature of light. So right now it looks like I'm white. It's because I have windows open and I have these two daylight tested lights. But if I were to go back to my childhood middle school, you guys remember being in public school and all the lights were really crappy. Aaron, I'm sure you remember that, where one light would be green, one would be pink, and everything looks wild. That's kind of how that works. And then the other thing that I really like about this, oh, you know what? I think it might be because, okay. Aaron, we're gonna toss it over to you and you're gonna do this. I want you to show how you can switch between JPEG and RAW.
Sure.
And then lastly, the focusing. So that is our basic introduction to Lightroom for me, but I know that you're probably the Lightroom camera for me, but I know you're tired of seeing my face. So we're going to go back to the star of the show, Mr. Bernstein, Hungry Boy, and he's going to show you the last two features. And then we're going to get into a little bit more of the things in Lightroom that he likes. But please keep asking questions.
All right.
And shout out to the people that do tech for us. They're the best.
Especially this year. I don't know. Should I do selfie mode? I guess it's.
Do it. Bless us with your beautiful face.
I mean, twice. So same green screen and a mic.
Yeah.
So
we're actually in the same room. You just guys just don't know.
I wish. So one thing that you can do is you can shoot in different file formats. You can shoot in JPEG from Lightroom, but you can also shoot from RAW. I don't think it's going to let me do it either. But you can see it won't let me click on it.
It might be okay. So I thought it was me, and maybe the tech folks can tell us. It might be an issue with Zoom. With how we're recording. I'm not sure, but in that very top corner, we can. I thought it was something that I was doing wrong, or maybe because I had like a promo or something. But yeah, up in the top of that, you can switch from JPEG to DNG, which is a digital negative file. It's a larger file, but it gives you much more ability to edit in a larger swath.
Yes. And then another thing, I don't know if you touched on this, but this is so weird to do, but in the three dots up here in the corner, while you're shooting, you can open up for more settings. There is this slider right here, max screen brightness. So if you do have your phone sort of dimmed, if you're trying to save battery, if you're on the go, you can actually turn this on to make sure that while you're shooting live in Lightroom, your screen brightness is all the way up just for when you're using that, so that you're like properly seeing and exposing what you're shooting in. Another nice thing up here is you can change the aspect ratio that you're shooting in. So let's say if you know for sure, like you just want to look at something square for Instagram, you can change that and shoot directly square. You can shoot 16:9 if you're shooting something like video or photos for stories. And then they also have like a 3:2 or 4:3 option as well. Those are two tools that I use a lot. Just if I know I'm shooting mobile and it's only living on mobile, sometimes I just want to shoot in the aspect ratio that I know the final output will be, if it's like a no frills sort of personal thing, instead of shooting like a full raw image, full frame.
Okay, so for whatever reason it wasn't working there, but I can do it on my iPad. So we're actually going to go back to my iPad. If nothing else, although technology is betraying us, we are here and Lightroom is making it possible because we have like 400 devices and we are not afraid to make a mistake. So you shouldn't be afraid to ask questions. So please ask them. Okay, so we're on the iPad. You're seeing just the really weird corner of my room that I'm filming in. But here's something to point out. So down here, you can see the touch. In the right corner, there is this really cool ability for you to focus. That's a little different than what you do in your native camera app. So in your native camera app, you press and hold, and it will lock on that thing, and it'll both expose for that thing, and it will light for that thing. But we all know that that's not necessarily always what we want to do, because your job as a photographer is to translate something that you see to your subject so that they can understand what you want. And so not every time is the thing that you're exposing for the thing that you're focusing on. And so you can, let's say, for example, we want this to be brighter. So I can brighten this up, and then I can choose to focus on any part of this I want to. The green lines that you're looking at for this manual focus let you know what exactly is in focus. So this cap, the bottom of this lens, or let's say for some reason I really wanted to point out the fact that my apartment is like sparse and looks weird. And so we're going to focus on everything in the background. Or if I wanted to focus on what was ahead of me, I would just go to my foreground. And that's how you create depth. You create depth a lot of different ways, but I know a lot of folks are like, when should I buy a fancy camera? Congratulations, your phone is your fancy camera. And using your phone and this focusing feature, you can create that depth that you look for when you want to have a lower aperture image that just has that like bokeh or those beautiful lights, or just have everything kind of behind you. It's kind of hard to show now because we're living in this green screen space, but promise you it is doable. And then the thing Aaron was trying to show you is up here, you can switch between, Aaron and I, you can switch between DNG and JPEG, and it just alters the size of the image and what you can edit. And that is like one of the cooler things about some of the coolest things about Lightroom Mobile, that ability to get the raw file from your camera. If you're curious as to why that raw is important, is a JPEG is essentially your camera making decisions for you, and the raw is like the entire file, and then you can take it in the Lightroom and really be able to hone in on it. Anything you'd like to add, Mr. Bernstein?
I think you nailed it.
So questions about Android, I can't answer those because I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to I don't know what the updates are, but I'm gonna see if there's anything else that anyone would like to see. But if not, we're gonna hop in and talk about how we edit and specific parts. So I did mention saturation and vibrance before. Aaron, would you like to talk about curves, or would you like me to?
It does not matter. You're probably more eloquent about it, but I can always walk through on an example edit on sort of how I approach them as well.
Well, we're going to switch my screen to my computer because it's a little bit easier to use curves on my computer, in my opinion. Let me know if you can see it, and we are going to kind of get rolling. So we're going to go into, once again, just as a reminder, albums hold photos and folders hold albums. So one thing that I like to do for my import is y'all will see in this corner, now that we're on my computer, I can zoom in, which is pretty cool. I have years, and then I have the work that's in it. One thing I like to do with some of the older work, you'll see I have a month, year, day strategy. So it's month, like January, the date, the client underscore what the job is, because sometimes I have different jobs, but just something to keep in mind, like please, please, please keep your stuff organized. And something else to point out that I forgot to do previously is, we shouldn't go to all photos. Who knows what's in there? Let's go to something safer. You can search in this top bar for anything intelligently. So I could search for guitar. These chords are getting to me. I can go to this top bar. And I can search for even the color pink. And you'll see that it will help me find what I'm looking for intelligently. I'm not a big keyword person, so the one thing that's nice about the cloud-based service is it will help you find things a little bit easier. So anyway, getting into curves, and so let's go into my folder called streaming, and then I have a little homie in here ready to go. So the way curves works, find a photo that's not super complex. Or you know what, in honor of Aaron, we will look at some food. The way curves works is that you can really do almost anything on curves. You can brighten or darken your image, but you can also change your colors. So right here in the curves panel, you can see that there's a couple different features. There's a tone curve, a point curve, and then point curves for each of these colors. You access the curves panel inside of light. It's at the very bottom. Basically what this little kind of mess you're looking at over here, this is your histogram. So it's like a chart or a graph, shout out to math, of the light values in your image. So this bottom left corner are your shadows, and the bottom right corner are your highlights. How do I know that? Let's see what happens if I slide this bottom right corner in either direction. You notice how all of a sudden, if I make it go up, it's getting brighter and it's getting flatter, because all of a sudden curves is telling the image, or excuse me, telling Lightroom that in this image, the darkest point is here. When in actuality, it's here. And so you're all of a sudden losing all of this detail. But what that could mean for you is, let's say that you need to make an image a little bit flatter, a little bit grayer, or you think there's too much shadow. You could bring up your black point a little bit, or your shadow point. Or let's say for some reason you're like, this isn't dark enough, let's go in this direction. Curves gives you the ability to be very specific and almost scientific about the values that you have in your image. To be clear, once again, I'm on the point curve, and I am on the point curve, not the tone curve. Because they just act differently, but I personally find the point curve to be a little bit more useful. Another thing I want to point out that's really helpful about curves is this little fun little ditty right here, the target adjustment. If you're unsure how curves works, this is a perfect way for you to start. All you do is you click target adjustment, come out, and you can move around the image. So you see as I move around the image, if you look at the curves in that right corner where they're at, as I move and pick different points, you'll see that the curves, they're making little dots along the graph. Those dots are letting me know what part of the curve is impacted. Because once again, like if I move it over here to white, you're gonna see that it's gonna move all the way up. Here, let me see actually what happens if I just move it. So you'll see that I'm in the white, it'll move all the way up to this top right quadrant, which is where the highlights are. But if I come down here, you're seeing it's starting to get, as I get darker, it's starting to get more into these shadows. So let's say that I say to myself, man, you know what? I think this wood is a little too dark. One cool thing about this target tool in the curves is you can press it, and now I can just start to move it and in bright or dark, and you'll see that not only is it brightening up the image, but the curve is altering. So as you, just kind of like the tutorials and Discover files, you can say to yourself, I don't really know how this works. Why don't I figure out where this point might be and edit from it? Does that make sense?
Makes sense to me.
Let me make sure, check my questions, make sure everybody's good. Photo Studio asked about how enter your own keywords to be searched. I'm not sure, so I hope that Valerie or Val will answer that. But
say
go ahead.
You can, because I do use them, and I
Okay.
can show you how to use them as well.
Oh, cool. We will do that.
I actually didn't know about the AI thing that you could just search and it would sort of show you their suggestions, which is really cool.
Yeah. Just to finish up with curves, once again, if, for example, this might seem tricky to y'all, but let's go to our versions. Let's go to original. And then let's say that a default edit for curves is you want to get a nice S curve. So you want to have 2 points in the image. So you kind of go over to this, look at this map, this graph, you want to tap your top right quadrant where the highlights are and bottom left where your shadows are. And you want to see if you want to either, you generally get contrast, you bring your shadows down a little bit, you bring your highlights up a little bit, and you're seeing that you're just getting a little bit of natural contrast that's pleasing to the eye. So if you look at our before and after, like we discussed, you can find that right down here in the desktop app. If we tap that, you'll see that it just goes from a little flatter to having just a tiny bit more contrast. That could be just a nice subtle way for you to start. And as you play with your curves, just like we discussed in other Lightroom things, I can double tap this button, this point in the curve, and it'll just go away. The colors do the same thing. Something to keep in mind for colors, instead of light and dark, the colors have balance. So the red, the opposite is cyan. So as you change it, you're gonna have some effects, green to pink and blue to yellow. And if you have questions, I can show you separately on a stream I have, or I have some videos, but I do have to hand it back over to Aaron because he has some more important things to talk about than whatever I'm blabbering on.
Yeah, so quickly just touching back on the keywords question, I can show you guys sort of how I organize by keywords. So if you want to manually add keywords to your photos, this is my client library just of like recent work. And so what I'll do is I'll add keywords on the client that I'm working with, but then I can also add keywords of more general terms. So for example, liquid. So if I'm looking at photos where I've shot liquid recently, I can filter it by that. I'm just clicking on this button in the top right. But then you can see there's some overlap. If I'm looking at this client called Hive, I have those milk shots in there as well.
Okay.
So it's just a nice way to quick view, something that it might not auto pick up on if you're working by project name or something that's personal to you that only you would know, you can pull them up that way. But then if you want like a more general scope, if you have a really comprehensive library of, let's say, onions in many different ways, you can filter that way. Just to keep it on the food topic.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. We had a question in here, Aaron, about versions.
Yes.
Brandy asked, after you do a lot of editing, who would go back to the original and start over? Some folks do, but that's not the point of versions. Versions is actually kind of like snapshots, which you have in Photoshop. And I will let Aaron discuss how he would use that.
Yeah, so I have an example somewhere. I want to say it's on this image. Let's say, I'm just looking at my image. So this is like a base photo. obviously the colors are very specific in here, but let's say like I'm not sure exactly how I want the final result to be, but I know that there's a lot to work with in here. So I have 3 different versions of this that I've edited before, this being the original, and this is sort of just an amplification of the original, bringing out those like pinks and purples in the highlights and in the front, and then just sort of really amping up just the vibrance in the background to get those reds and those yellows. But let's say I want it to go even a little bit warmer, but I'm not sure if that's the right answer. So now I can sort of just hop back and forth between these two to see which is the right one for me, or if I really want to change it or really push it and go super red, almost pink. And you can see I've also desaturated the highlights and the liquid in the front to get like pretty much like a completely different result from what the original is. I have that option as well. So I don't know. I'm a very indecisive editor. I like to dwell on things a lot, especially when there's just so much opportunity with an image like this. Like I can pretty much make the color relationship anything that I want. So by having these different versions, I can go back and pick and choose and sort of compare and contrast very easily versus taking up extra space by having like sometimes upwards of like 10 different file types for the same image.
Aaron, how do you feel about color mix? It's a tool that I love. And I was curious if you had any feelings about it that you'd be willing to share.
Sure. So if you go into your color tab, you can see at the top you have mix and you have grading, which is brand new. So with color grading, you can change the color grade of your shadows, your midtones, and your highlights, sort of like very similar to the curves if you're like focusing in on one channel, but this gives you like an overall sort of management. And then what's really cool is you can tweak the universal color grade of the whole image. So let's say with the highlights, like I want to really cool them down and amplify the sort of cooler tones in the highlights, but then I want like really warm shadow. I'll just do this really poorly for you guys to see. I like that contrast that that's creating, but overall I want to skew it a little bit more magenta with that universal tool all the way on the right. I can do that without sort of sacrificing the relationship between the highlights and the shadows that I've just set. We'll keep it. And then with mix, it's really cool because then I can go in specifically to each channel and adjust the hue or the saturation. So with this result, looking at the reds, I can pretty much only alter what the image is registering as red to change it. Let's say I like more of this yellow, and then now I want to bring out some of those magentas in the highlights. I can go into that channel and then amp up the saturation there and maybe adjust the hue to give it a little bit more contrast. I like color mix just because it's, 8 different base options to pull from. And a lot of the times, especially in the traditional sense, you're only looking at like the red channel, the blue channel, the green channel. So now you can kind of get like those in-betweens, especially in those varieties between like the reds and the yellows to get, very specific oranges or like a cooler purple or into the magentas, which is sometimes a little bit harder to work with.
Totally. Aaron, Sean, we'll get to versions right after this. Aaron, someone's asking about versions, but Michael Hugo said, can you completely change the color or replace and invert the colors, like take all the blues and make them reds?
Sure. I guess we can look back into this red channel. You can kind of see that we've already gone very yellow, and we can make it super, super yellow. And then maybe even in the grading and the midtones, because that seems like a midtone value, we can push this to like almost like a green yellow, and then go back in the highlights and bring that in.
Oh, are you serious? Oh no, I'm so sorry. Okay. Hey everybody, we ran.
We ran out of time.
we totally ran out of time because we got so excited. If you want to learn about versions, Aaron and I will do something on Instagram Live and explain it. Thank you so much. Thank you to Hungry Boy. Thank you to Adobe Live. Sorry that I stepped on my camera battery. We love you. Goodbye.